Welcome to the Heart Awakening series. My name is Patricia Connor, and today we have a very special guest, Tom Schimmer. And Tom has written a book, and the book is called 10 Things That Matter from Assessment to Grading. It's a very important book, and Tom is going to tell us all about it. But before I ask him a question, I'd like to say that Tom is an independent education consultant and an international speaker. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Thank you.
And love your book.
Thank you.
And how did you get started on writing a book like this?
Well, you know, as a classroom teacher, as someone who worked as a school administrator, you're always looking for new ideas, things that can help your students, things that can help you sort of bring together all the different strategies that can help kids be successful in school. And so certainly as I began searching for things that could help me be a more effective teacher, you know, I discovered the work of classroom assessment and the work of grading and reporting in a more accurate way. And as a result of that, you know, you start to implement your own ideas in your own classroom, and pretty soon you have some success, and you start to see things that you didn't have before in your classroom, results you didn't have before, and pretty soon, you know, that success leads to more success. You start to share those ideas with other people. People ask you to come and do a workshop. Next thing you know, you're being asked to do a lot of work in different places, and all of a sudden, you know, you realize that you're onto something, and so the opportunity came for me to write the book, and certainly I took advantage of that and took the opportunity and ran with it, and that's kind of how the book was produced. So yeah.
Did you feel that you were going to be an author?
At the time, I didn't. I mean, when I first started implementing a lot of these ideas, I was more focused on my own classroom. There was, you know, several students that I was thinking of, but one in particular, whose name was Chris, was a student who I really struggled with, and you know, having a fair bit of experience as a teacher, I thought I was, you know, getting to the top of my game. When I had Chris in my class, I was about 14 years into my career, and you know, I thought that I was a pretty good teacher, had pretty good skills, had pretty good experience. But I realized that what I brought to the table as a teacher was not enough to bring him along. And so as you start to implement these ideas, I was really focused on him. I was focused on helping him be the best he could be. I wasn't really focused on being an author. I was focused on helping this boy and truthfully the remainder of my class be successful in that particular school year. But from that year onward, I started to see these ideas being successful. I learned from other people. I read a lot. I did what I could do to build my knowledge up to get to the point where I felt like I could have something to say. So eventually it got to the point where I was able to write the book, but I didn't go into the work thinking about writing a book. I went into the work to help my students, and the book is really a byproduct of that, and really the opportunity presented itself years later.
Yeah. And things have changed for you ever since you wrote this book.
Yeah, things have changed quite a bit. You know, the couple of years after I started writing the book, I ended up getting to a point where I had to make a decision about my career because, you know, 20 years in education and had a fairly successful career, as many people do. But with the book came the opportunity to work as a consultant, to do speaking engagements across North America. And as you get into that work, you start to realize that you get some pretty positive feedback. People like what you have to say. And so I started to receive more and more requests to do that kind of work. And so once the book came out and things started to really, you know, blossom in that respect, I had a tough decision to make, a decision about whether or not I continue in my career and have the work as a consultant be a part-time, very part-time work, or whether I decide to immerse myself in this new work in terms of being a consultant and an author and a speaker and leave my job. So in 2011, I thought about it a lot, certainly, and spent a lot of times thinking about, you know, what the scenarios would be, but ultimately I made the decision to leave my employment with the school district I was working with and to pursue this work full time. And certainly now into my third year, I'm very excited about the potential. I've been very thrilled with the opportunities that have come my way, and certainly had the opportunity to work with some great people around the world. So it's been fantastic.
Mm-hmm. So we could talk a little bit more about when you were making that decision.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people that are in jobs that they're not particularly happy with. but they don't want to make the leap into something where they, that's unknown, basically. Now, you were happy with your job. You enjoyed your job.
I did, yeah. It's interesting to go through that because, I almost wish it was a situation where I didn't enjoy my job. It probably would have made the decision a lot easier, but I was quite happy in the work I was doing. But regardless of that, I think you get to a point where you start wanting to listen to your inner voice. You want to listen to the voice inside your head, which is telling you that this is truly what you're meant to do. This is what your passion is. This is what drives you every day. And certainly, the feedback I receive from people, the feedback on the book, the feedback on the workshops, the presentations, the keynote speeches I did, all of that feedback sort of validates you and lets you know that what you're doing is something that you're pretty good at. Can you turn that into a full-time career? That was my dilemma, was whether or not I could follow my passion and turn that into full-time employment, being self-employed. And it's a difficult decision. I spent a lot of sleepless nights thinking about different scenarios, what-if scenarios, what if this went wrong, what if this went right. Ultimately, for me, it came down to regret. I didn't want to, at the end of my life, have any regret about not following my passion and not following what I think I was here to do. Now, whether this is a permanent thing or whether this is just the next chapter or phase of my life, I don't know that. But what I do know is that in that moment 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago now, in that moment when I made that decision, it was the absolute right thing for me in that moment. And I think so often we wait for things to be perfect in order to make these kinds of decisions. We say, well, if I just have a little bit more time, or if I had a little bit more money, or if I didn't have this car payment, I didn't have something like that. And ultimately those what ifs never go away. And what you realize is that when you have a moment of inspiration and you feel like there's an opportunity in front of you, I think the difference between people who are successful and who are not is just the fact that the people who are successful are the people who took that step and decided that they were going to act upon their passion as opposed to waiting and hesitating. So for me, what the lesson I've learned out of all of this is how important it is to really follow that inner voice and know that you are always on the right track when your inner voice and your inner feeling is telling you that this is what you're meant to do and this is the work that you're here to do.
So you talk about your inner voice, and what does is it a sound? Is it a feeling? What is your inner voice?
Well, for me, I mean, I don't know what anybody else's inner voice is, but for me, my inner voice is a feeling. It's that when I'm doing the work I do now, it feels as though time is non-existent. It feels as though time stands still. It feels like I could do it all day. It just feels natural. It's exactly what I'm here to do. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like it's part of what I'm supposed to do. And I think when you get into that moment, when you feel that emotion, because I think for anybody following their passion and their dream, it's more about the feeling than it is the intellectual thought about what you want to do. Because we all want stuff. I mean, we all want to do things, and if wanting worked, then everybody would have what they wanted. And I think the difference is that it's the feeling that you generate which makes your passion and your dream believable to you. It has to be not realistic, because if we're all realistic, we would never step outside the box, but it has to be believable. And what makes a dream or a passion believable is it feels like it's possible for you. And that for me is what my inner voice is. It's that feeling that I know that this is something I can do, and I know this is something that I can be successful at. And sure, it's going to take work, and I always have to get better, and I always have to learn, and I always have to improve myself. It's not as though it just comes easy, but it feels natural, it feels right. The inner emotions are aligned with what I want to do. It makes you feel good, and if what you're doing makes you feel good and passionate, then I think you're on the right track.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And but you were a classroom teacher.
Yeah.
And so you were used to speaking to a group of people.
Sure.
Now, how is that different from what you do now?
Well, I don't think it's very different in the sense, in some respects. I have worked with colleagues in the past who are classroom teachers who have difficulty speaking to a room full of adults. They don't have an issue with a classroom full of children, but with adults it's different. But for me, I think that there are some differences. Certainly adult audiences and adult learners are different than children in the way that they learn, etc., in terms of, you know, the engagement and all of those different things that go into that. But ultimately for me it's not very different, because the art of presentation and the art of providing a strong message and a clear message to people, whether you're dealing with 6-year-olds or whether you're dealing with 30-year-olds or whether you're, you know, an adult audience, to me it's no different. It feels as though it's just about the repetition, it's about the practice, it's about having a career of being able to do that. And certainly there is an advantage for teachers and educators who get into public speaking because of that rehearsal, the rehearsal they have every day. But it's something anybody can do with practice. It's something anybody can do with coaching, and something anybody can do and overcome that fear for sure. So yeah.
Mm. So you have spoken in different countries?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so where have you been?
I have spoken in Vietnam, I've spoken in China, in Shanghai, and this coming September 2013 headed to Myanmar to work with an international school there. So
very exciting.
Yeah, it's very exciting. I'm looking forward to that. I really enjoy the international work. Most of my work is around North America, but certainly the opportunity to travel and see different places, different countries, literally around the world, is very exciting, and it's been a great opportunity. Mm-hmm. So. Yeah.
And are the teachers different? The international school teachers different from the teachers in North America?
Well, in some respects they are. It really depends on the school you're working in. Some of the schools are international college preparatory schools, so they're very high academic schools. Some of the schools I work in, it's not that they don't have high academic standards, but it's a different clientele. So some of them are driven by sort of high international standard scores, etc. The kind of testing and rigorous testing protocols that lead to college entry to schools like, you know, Harvard and McGill and those types of Ivy League schools. There are other international schools that are a little bit more typical of what you would find in North America in terms of a mixed student body. So you'd have teachers who are teaching at the high end, but you'd also have kids who struggle, students with special needs, etc. So it just depends on what school you're working in. But ultimately, what I find is that teachers are more similar than different. That, you know, the care for kids, the relationships with kids, the work that they do with children every day, whether they're high academic kids or kids with special needs, they are always, you know, very caring people, and there's a consistency about teachers, you know, around the world in terms of the work they do. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And do you always teach on the same subject? Or?
It is mostly in the same area. Certainly there are obviously 10 things in the book, and there are specific topics that we would cover to greater detail depending on what the school wanted or what the school district was looking for. But generally it's in this area of classroom assessment and also on student grading and reporting. I've also done some work in educational leadership. I've worked a lot with principals and assistant principals and district staff, as well as working with schools around student behavior and how to develop behavior improvement plans and things like that. So those are the areas that I mostly work in, almost exclusively, the areas of behavior, assessment, as well as leadership.
Great.
Yeah.
So you sound very passionate about what you do.
Yeah.
And how did you find that passion? How did you connect? Now, I know that you said that you listened to your inner voice.
Yeah.
But what was it that that led you to even listen to your inner voice? Did you have some kind of influence from people that you read about, or who was your influence? Who influenced you?
I think that, you know, for me it was in my early part of my career, and certainly in my 20s, I wasn't paying attention to anything. I was just trying to make a career of it, make a go of it. But I think as I got a little bit older, I got into my 30s, I started to reflect a little bit more on, you know, I think we all ask those big questions. What is life all about? What's the purpose? Why am I here? All those different questions. Then you begin to sort of try to answer those questions with different resources. And certainly, you know, I've read a lot of the people that many people who are watching this have read, people like, you know, Wayne Dyer and others who, Louise Hay and other people who have, you know, who are, I guess, more spiritually evolved than I was and am, and look to them for guidance. You know, I remember it was my sister-in-law Ellen who gave us the Secret as a Christmas present one year when it first came out, and you know, that was intriguing to me because it was right around the time where I was very much reflective of, you know, where I was going. I felt like I was kind of in the middle part of my life. what some people call the afternoon of your life, and I'm just wondering, what is the next phase of life going to bring? So all of that sort of led me down that path of paying attention to my inner voice and paying attention to how I was feeling and starting to learn that I actually had some influence over what happened to me, that I could draw positive circumstances to me through positive energy, positive thoughts, those types of things. When I was younger, I didn't think of that stuff. You just sort of, life happened to you and you just accepted the fact that for some people things worked out and for other people it didn't. And then I started to change that thought and realized that I had a lot more influence over my own life and my own circumstances than I realized I had. And so I started to put some of those things into practice, and I started to see things manifest for me that I never maybe thought was possible. And certainly the book and my new career was definitely a result of that kind of thinking and that kind of perspective.
Yeah, that's definite manifestation.
Yeah, for sure.
And now this is book number 1. Is there a book 2?
There is book 2, which I'm just starting to write right now, which is focused on classroom assessment again, but we're focused more on what we call 21st century competencies. So what's happening in education right now is that education is moving into more of a 21st century perspective, which means we're trying to not only teach content in terms of math and science and social studies and English, but we're also trying to teach skills that kids can use across the curriculum and skills that prepare them for life in the 21st century. Things like creativity, things like collaborative skills, things like critical thinking, clear communication, all of those different skills that are now more relevant because of the digital age we live in, because of the amount of information that students consume on a daily basis. All of that's becoming important. So I'm sort of taking some of the ideas from this book and adapting them to look at the classroom practices around those competencies to help sort of focus people on what we can do, taking some of the core fundamentals that are timeless, but applying them to a new context and new content.
Yeah, so that's very, very important because children need those skills. They need the skills to be successful.
Yeah, they're quite relevant for sure in this day and age. It's not that, and I think the important thing to remember is that, years ago we taught critical thinking, we taught, collaboration, we did all of those things. But now we have a greater emphasis on those skills. They're coming up to the level of equality with things like social studies and science and math. That knowledge is important, but it's also important to have the skills that transcend any sort of boundaries that some curriculum or some work sort of contains them in. Yeah.
So how do you prepare for these trips that you're going on and what you're going to be presenting? Like, do you work from a position of having an intention of what the outcome will be of your courses when you go abroad?
Yeah, usually try to get some information from the people I'm working with about what they would like the outcome to be and what they would like the sort of focus to be. Because certainly I have a lot of material I can talk about, and so it's important for me to know what their what they're hoping to get out of the day and what they think I can bring to the day. And then from there, I sort of, take their ideas and I begin to think about what I would like to see for the day and some of the mindsets I would like people to be able to develop or leave with once the day is finished. So I think it's a combination of what other people want from me in terms of specific outcomes, and then I sort of take that and think about what I would like to sort of bring to the table in addition to that, as far as the kinds of mindsets and ideas and examples I want them to leave with. So yeah. Okay.
So this video will be watched by many people around the world.
Okay.
So if you have one piece of advice or one message for people out there, what would it be?
I think the one message that I probably would think about above all others is the idea that so much of what we think we're afraid of is really not real. And that it's really important to listen to yourself and listen to your passions and take a chance on you, to take a chance. One of the biggest things, the biggest hurdles I had to get over was believing that I could be successful, that there's always that tendency for us to imagine the worst case scenario and things not working out. And I really had to force myself early on to consider the best case scenario and the possibility that things would work out better than I expected. And pretty soon that became a habit. And pretty soon I started to get into situations where everything around me, I always thought about it's going to work out. Things work out for me. The best case scenario is going to happen. And I spend very little energy on the negative outcomes, the negative circumstances. So if I would give anybody any message, it's to bet on yourself, to believe that you can be successful, and to do what it takes to generate the emotion and feeling of being successful in what you want to achieve in the current moment. And that will certainly bring what you want closer to you in a more timely manner, for sure.
Great. So thank you so much, Tom.
You're welcome.
And where can people find your book?
My book is published by Pearson and also the Assessment Training Institute in Portland, Oregon, as the US edition, and Pearson is the Canadian edition. And they can find it online at the Pearson website, pearson.com. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Thank you.